Hello.
Hello everyone, welcome back. Today, we wanted to talk about building wealth, but building financial wealth. And essentially what I thought would be good to talk about was Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I feel like is always recommended as a book to read when you're getting into like making money, building wealth, making smart decisions, etc. It's like always raved about as one of the best books to read. And I thought it would be good to kind of break it down as into a much more relatable sense and also break it down in a way that does not push like having to become an entrepreneur or quit your job or like try and develop multiple streams of income. Because I think the basis of the book is something that like the message behind it needs to go far and wide and I think can apply to people with regular 9 to 5s because the messaging is all about how to actually divvy up the money that you earn and put it into things that like work harder over life rather than like I said, like trying to quit your job and like start a business or invest into property. Like those are just like ways of doing the things that he talks about in the book. And essentially we wanted to go over like, what wealth actually is in this day and age, like what assets and liabilities are. I wanted to talk a little bit about how I'm planning to, or like how I do invest into assets and how I want to use those to like essentially build like a rich girl lifestyle for me, because that is essentially like today's version of Rich Dad Poor Dad is like, I've spoken about it on one of my YouTube videos as like entering your rich girl era. So like using investing in assets and stuff to actually fund like a nicer life. And I feel like Farah, you've done that in not like in the exact same way as me, but we've got like very different perspectives on financial wealth building at like quite a young age, which I feel like can really help someone when they're thinking about like, okay, if I'm earning more money, how can I invest it? And like what even is an asset? And actually what even is wealth? Because is wealth just like savings, like a really good amount of savings? Because I used to think that as well. And also, is wealth just a status? Because that's also hard to determine. Like, at what point can I say I'm wealthy? Kicking us off, do you want to talk about like what you think of wealth and like what has wealth meant to you in life, and what do you think like assets are as well? Because I feel like that's an important distinction that goes into the whole wealth equation as well.
Yeah, so for me, I think I was very similar to you in the sense that I thought building wealth was about saving as much money as you could in your bank account. And I used to think that, yeah, the more money I had in savings, and maybe there was a point in time back in the day that that was the way to build wealth. But yeah, I definitely don't think that's the way anymore, especially with like interest rates and inflation. It's just really not worth it to do that. I think it's tricky because I still do save for example, the things that I want in life. So my idea of wealth is being able to afford the things that I want and the things that make my life either easier or more enjoyable or feel more fulfilled. So me being able to afford those things is my idea of being wealthy. I don't really have a number on it, or like you said, I don't know if there's any point you get to where you're like, okay, I'm wealthy now. Like, I don't know how people determine that. So that's maybe something to discover. But I have my emergency fund, which is, I wouldn't say that's saving. That's just a fund that I keep there for emergencies. So
Yeah,
that,
like the untouchable.
yeah, so that's the pot that I guess is there. If I do ever save money for a pot, it is for a specific thing. Like, for example, I've been saving for my wedding. So I always, if I do save for something, it's for a purpose. It's not just a case of I'm going to save this money and then that's how I'm going to grow my money. Like, that's never my mindset when I'm saving it. So if the next thing is I want to buy a car, then I'll be saving a pot for that. If there's a holiday I want to go to, I'll save a pot for that. But those are actually things I'll spend my money on to like then enjoy my life. It's not really a case of I'm going to just save money to then get more money. My way of now getting more money, hopefully, is by investing. So I did start quite early on with property. Now, property is a tricky one because I definitely know that Rich Dad Poor Dad classes houses as liabilities, especially with like the mortgages and stuff. So I think it is difficult, especially I'm even in a place where I'm thinking like, do I want to buy a new, like a bigger home? Because obviously I'm married now and I can't live in a flat forever. Like, it is quite tight on space, and we do definitely want to move on. Now, my husband has already bought a house, but in terms of like a family home and something that we want to have together, we are thinking about like whether we want to do that. But now I'm in a bit of a different mindset to where I was maybe a couple of years ago when I did buy my first home and then a second home. Unless you know that your property that you're buying is at a really good value that you can later sell it on and make loads of money on it and get a good profit from it and gain, or you buy it to rent it out and you make your money that way. Those are two ways to then build your wealth on the property and turn it into an asset, I guess. Because living in your property is definitely turning it into a liability, because then you're paying a mortgage if it's not bought outright. So I am in the position where, like, yeah, then I'd be trading, I guess, a mortgage for another. We'd be living in it. And to me, that's not something that I want to, like, trap I feel like my mindset is so much that I'll be trapping my money into a house if I did go and buy another one. So it's a tricky thing, because obviously we need homes to live in, and this day and age especially, I have a few family members trying to actually find places to rent at the moment, and they're really struggling. Just the renting market at the moment is crazy, like so high in demand. And I don't know if it is because of maybe the mortgage, like the costs of investing in a mortgage and the interest rates and all those kind of things. So I am definitely grateful that I got on the property ladder early on. And I would still recommend it for people, like first time buyers and things, to try invest in property in a way to make money, because it is definitely a good source of income if you do it the right way. Because the way I did it was a property that needed doing up. It was a really good price at the time, and it has gone up in value a lot since I've like done work to it, and especially just as prices have increased over the last couple of years. So it's definitely was a good investment, but you have to just be very careful, I think, with property, because there's a point where it could end up like decreasing in value depending on what price you get it for and the state you get it in.
Yeah, I think that's like the important thing with like a couple of like asset classes is that you can't actually guarantee that you'll get a return
Yeah.
on the money that you invest into it. And I think the important thing you highlighted with property specifically is that you have to make that distinction between, it's probably not an asset if you're buying it to live in, but if you're buying it to live in, but also like what I did with my flat, we bought it, but we have always had someone in our spare room. So it's really reduced the liability aspect of that investment as a property anyway, even though it's still our actual main residence and like our actual home. So we did it in that way, and we did that very purposefully. But I think there's also another rule I've seen. It's like the 7-year rule, I think. If you're going to buy somewhere to live in, the 7 years will at least cover enough amount of time to at least get some kind of return on there as well. And I think with property it is a bit more difficult. Like that's what one of the asset classes I've not really thought about investing in. My partner has done. But I'm a little bit too, like, it's very upfront. You need a lot of upfront cash for that. I think, especially if you're not trying to build a property investment business where you're not relying on like friends and family loans, or you're not using other people's money to buy property, which I think is the big thing to do if you're using property as your main asset class. Is I've seen a lot of property investment companies, they don't use any of their own money to actually make these initial deposits and stuff as well. So that's why I've been kind of put off, because I'm just obsessed with internet businesses and like online businesses. So for me, it's like low cost. How can I make my money actually work harder? So the route I've gone down is investments as well. But you also touched on a really good point about actually, if you don't invest into a property as your like actual home, and it's more of an asset that you maybe plan to rent out, I think that mindset is the mindset that I wanted to focus on with like the whole rich dad poor dad concepts. Because if you invest into something that gives you like an amount of money per year, so for example, you invest into a property, you rent it out, you get like X amount of money per year or per month, that money is essentially like the income that you're getting from your asset, and you can use that income to fund your lifestyle. So it's, rather than like trying to rely on your own money to to not do much, because if you're relying on one income to try and expand your life on, you're really it's quite limiting. Whereas if you invest into an asset and then grow that asset, and then by virtue of that grow the income you're earning from the asset, and then using that to actually pay for things that you just want, that's the kind of mindset that will enable you to retire with more and also like build up your actual wealth more. Because what you mentioned quite at the beginning of when you started speaking, you were saying like, what is wealth? Like, what is the point that you actually know you're wealthy, you're not wealthy? And I've also struggled with that like concept, right? But I think if we take it back to like the actual definition of wealth, or maybe net worth, I think net worth is a good like equivalent thing to think about. Your net worth is like your overall assets minus your liabilities in life. So like kind of treating yourself like a bit of a business. And I have been in a negative net worth for a while. If I remove like I don't know if I've ever like I don't know if you count your mortgage in yours and stuff. For example, I never really counted my student loans in mine. I don't count my mortgage, but I also don't put my flat like valuation in it as well. I don't count it as an asset, and I don't count the mortgage as a liability. And I've gone from a negative to a positive net worth because of that. And I think that's the way I measure my wealth, because if you think about it like factually, if you have more assets than you do have liabilities, you are fine, because you're not like constantly in debt or like constantly in a position of owing someone, whether that's the bank or like a car financer or a credit card company. Like, you don't owe anyone anything at any given amount of time. And the things that make up your assets, like they can be your savings as well. And that's what I've counted by like discounting my flat. I count my emergency fund, I count my like short-term savings, and I count my pension and my investments as well. And I think pensions, I literally forget I have a pension sometimes. So all these things like make up your assets, even though that's like some of it is money that you can't necessarily touch. It is money that's yours. It is like actual wealth that belongs to you, and you can have it in your hands if you wanted to. So that's something else that I wanted to talk about. But so you invest into stocks and shares as well, right?
Yeah, I do. That area is a little bit more like still confusing for me, and I just kind of have tried to experiment with it a little bit. There was a point in time where I was going to try and invest in, like individual company stocks, and then I was like, this I felt like you had to monitor it a lot more, and I didn't want to do the kind of investing that you have to constantly like check up on it. Has the value gone up or down? And do I need to withdraw? Or, like all this buying and selling, like there's a level of like you end up getting into like actual trading. And I didn't really want to do that. So what I invest in at the moment is the S&P, and also an ETF. I think it's like a global equity fund that I do it through Vanguard. I can't remember what the name of it is now. But it's another like grouped bunch of companies that, or like countries that you invest in, and then the value of that is like determined. So it's not really based on like a single company or like their value. And that's kind of how I've stuck to it, and I've done that for a good few years. I just have a direct debit that when my salary came in, it would just take a certain amount out every single month, and I'd done that maybe for the last 3 or 4 years. I think I started around COVID time. I wish I'd started sooner. So if you listen to this, do it sooner. Because I've seen how much the pots have grown, and even like not even my own money is in there. And I invest in a one that gives you dividends, so I can actually see like how many dividends it gives me. And it's just like free money. Like, it's actually crazy that you just get money on top of your money that isn't your money, but you get to keep it, and you also get it tax free as well, up to that 20k. So if you invest in an ISA, I would just say try it. At least just do the more common ones like the S&P, the FTSE 100 or 500. I don't know which one it is. But you just want to make a start sooner rather than later, because I do wish, like, if I started right at the beginning of my working career, that would have been like an extra couple years I would have had. And it's cumulative. So it would have, bumped up my amount, I can imagine, quite a lot. But I think there's a fear around investing in stocks and shares just because everyone talks about, like, because there was a point in time where I invested in crypto. I don't know why I did that. I had no idea what I was doing, and that ended badly. Like,
I still invest in
do
crypto, not
you?
gonna lie. Yeah. And it's my weighting is it's a bit too high. It's not very responsible of me.
Really? So I did that and I got burnt. Basically, long story short, like I lost a
Really?
lot of money, yeah, in that because I don't know. I just guess I was just riding the wave of like what I thought I should be doing because so many people were talking about it, buzzing about it.
Yeah. Well, what did you invest in?
Uh, Ethereum
Wait, you lost money on Ethereum?
and yeah, because I invested in it at the time just before it like boomed and then it came down and I basically lost everything I put in it. Well, I still had some
But did you
left.
take it out?
I took some out, but I made a loss. Like I'm pretty sure I put more in than what
Yeah.
I got back in the end. So it burnt me a little bit. And then after that, I was like, I don't want to touch you anymore. Like I'm just. Plus, I think the platform that I was using then started threatening. Like the UK weren't
Oh, I
happy
know
with
what you
them.
mean.
Binance.
Binance, yes.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
used.
I used Binance for a while as well in COVID. I did some dumb stuff. I bought Dogecoin, and
Did you?
yeah, and there's also a Shiba. There was like a Shiba Inu coin as well, which was different to the Dogecoin, and some other like random stuff.
I bought a lot of random ones. Yeah, some like I don't think anyone talked about them publicly, so I don't know
Like
why
I said,
I
yeah, I
got
don't even
burnt.
know why I did. I got really into like Reddit though at that point, like
Oh, really?
the crypto threads. I was reading all of them. I got Safe Coin or like Safe Moon Coin because they had a
The
really
moon.
inspiring manifesto, and I was like, yeah, I buy into this.
Yeah, it's crazy when you like think about because I also realized afterwards, I think I must have seen a post. It's like if you find out about stuff online, it's too late.
Yes.
It's too late. If it's in the news, it is too late. Don't bother. And I was stupid enough. I think I did end up. The thing is, I invested in the Ethereum before it was like a big thing in the news. So then I did actually. Maybe then I ended up just as much as I had at the beginning.
Do you know what? Like, I think this is also a lesson in that you actually don't make a loss unless you actually take it out. Like with crypto,
Yeah.
with stocks, with shares,
Yeah.
you don't actually lose money unless you actually withdraw that amount into your bank account,
As
like
in,
once
because
you've
it'll go
invested it.
back up, maybe.
Well, because like you don't like the I don't mean realize as in like you
Oh,
realize, but like the
realize.
realized loss
Mm.
doesn't, so it's not real until you actually withdraw it. So yeah, you that valuation of your Bitcoin or of your Ethereum went down loads, but perhaps if you'd left it in, and this is the annoying
You
thing,
just
it's like
never
if
know.
we left it in,
Yeah.
we'd maybe have more, it would claw back up, and probably everyone who's withdrawn their Bitcoin before its recent
Mm.
shoot back up is probably just kicking themselves as well. You know what I'm really kicking myself about? 2010, 2011, Bitcoin was like $300. How old was I?
But you were
18. I
literally.
could have bought one Bitcoin.
But did you have any idea that world existed back then? I feel like 18 is very young. To be honest, the 18-year-olds these days are probably the ones that are like
That's the annoying
heavily
thing. It's
investing
like
in
I'm the one who's sitting there like crying about not buying Bitcoin, and then there's like 18-year-olds with
made
like
them millions.
Lamborghinis and drop shipping businesses telling me to invest on
That's another
TikTok.
thing. Like these things that you find out about, like drop shipping, like as soon as people are making like viral videos on this stuff, it's too late to actually make
Hmm.
good profits on it, which is so annoying because you just don't know until that point. It's really hard. Like, how do these people actually figure this stuff out before it starts
Well, it's
booming?
like it's trialing and erroring, isn't it? And like that's the whole annoying thing, is that you do have to take a few risks, and also all these people online, and most of them are really young and have just literally gotten lucky from the amount of times they've tried.
Hmm.
If they have gotten lucky, a lot of it is like just spewing crap online to try and get views and stuff like that. But with a lot of these businesses, you have to go through a lot of like grind, investment, trials and errors, probably losing a lot of money, but then trying again to end up actually either making a decent income or making your money back in some cases as well. And I think the same thing applies to building wealth and like generating or building assets that then generate you an income. When we're telling you to like invest into assets, we're not saying if you invest into a stocks and shares ISA and put money in the SP 500 tomorrow, you're going to start earning dividends next year. Like, it's not going to work like that. You have to consistently invest into an asset, give it time to grow with compound interest, because compound interest is like the magic ingredient here that like turns your money into an incredible amount without any work, and then it's all tax free. It's great. But it needs time to be able to do that, and then the time having done that then gives you the income back to then like do the things you want to do in life. So like if you want to get a fancy car, you can get a fancy car, but why don't you just invest into I'm not saying to do this, by the way, I'm not a financial advisor, but you invest into an asset for 5 years, you make that, like whatever sacrifices or compromises you have to make in order to build an asset for 5 years, that hopefully would maybe be able to generate like monthly income that equates the car payments that you're able to then use the asset to pay for your liabilities. Because that's the ideal end position you want to be in, is all of your expenses are covered by things you get back from your assets, whether that's like interest, dividends, rental like yield from properties you invest in. It's like you want those little outputs to cover your little outputs as well. So then you're kind of like running off your assets, if that makes sense, which is like the ideal position to be in. But you can't actually be in that position unless you get started like ASAP Rocky.
Yesterday is the best time. Just on the investing point, I do remember actually just in terms of like knowing what to invest in. So I saw a Girls That Invest post the other day. It went really viral on TikTok, and she basically talked about investing in Ozempic when everyone was like trying to actually buy the actual product. She was investing in the stocks, and then because it became like a viral thing that everyone was talking about, the share price increased, so then the money made increased. And that was such a smart thing to say and think about, because you never think when these things go viral online, or like these certain products or services that people start using, and there's always something around the corner that like generates a bit of buzz and people get obsessed over and everyone's talking about, but everyone wants to go and grab at the actual product or the thing that people are talking about. But then if you think about it, like though, because people are obviously interested in it, then the actual share price of that like company skyrockets. So that is actually the smart thing to invest in, the actual product. And that's what she was saying in the video. And I was like, oh, damn, that's how the rich get rich. Okay.
Yeah, literally, you have to. But I think it's all knowing that like, okay, where do trends come from? And like understanding that like businesses are the sources of all these trends. And then once you understand that, you can understand that like, okay, I can actually invest into the business. And I know that investing into the business is going to give me money because the trend is driving up business profits. Like understanding how the world works helps you then make that decision. Like that's so clever and like so strategic. And there's also the question of like, I saw that post as well, and I was thinking, not only can you invest into Ozempic or like things that are trending, but you have to think about like how those trends are actually impacting society as a whole. So like what is the aftermath of Ozempic? Is it going to be that like women or people on Ozempic are going to then, after a few months, will it like cause a spike in other wellness trends or like other products that they'll use to be recovering from the side effects of Ozempic? Like what are the side effects of Ozempic, and like where does the trend take the people who are using, like what is the trend actually doing to humans? And then so what is the next thing that you can invest in? And like thinking about the impact of the trend itself and like the product itself on humans and like the people who are using it, because I think that is also, it's like takes that strategy to the next level of like, okay, if I'm really invested or like investing into current wellness trends or current health trends, Ozempic is going to have an effect on whoever's taking it. I think there are like really famous side effects, not infamous, I should say, side effects. And I'm not sure exactly what they are, but there's going to be products out there that are going to be made to either diminish them or, help them get better. And it's going to end up being the next big thing. So it's like finding out what those are and investing into those as well. And it's also a really good opportunity to actually even start businesses there. If you think about like, okay, if 80% of women are like being directed at Ozempic, what is the aftermath and where is the product or opportunity that I can like leverage there as well? But that's probably another topic to talk about, because that's less asset building and more business building. But yeah, it's so strategic. And I think if you're listening and like all this stuff is like piquing your interest, I think Simran, Girls That Invest, she has a investing masterclass course, and I think that would be something that would be really good to do, because I think it is really important to understand that like it is actually possible to go and invest into a company if you see it doing well, especially if it's public. You have an investment account open on a trading platform, but like a stocks and shares platform, and you know how to actually do that transaction. It's then so much easier to make those decisions as and when they happen, because trends themselves, like, I mean, not that we want anyone to invest overnight, like based on a trend, but you can make those decisions faster if you actually understand like how the economy and how businesses function and how like profits made and stuff like that. But the alternative, which you invest into and I also invest into, index fund tracked funds, I think are the best, just because they're ultimate like lazy girl rich hack. Just because literally it's like one fund, it tracks the top 500 performing companies in the US. They're always making money. In the last like 30-40 years, I don't even know the exact amount of time, that index has always performed well. Like in investing, there is the whole idea that like you can basically kind of get a dollar cost average for your shares or your investments. And essentially what that is that these companies or this index fund will, based on the performance of companies like year on year, so these top 500 companies, they're not always going to do like extremely well. There'll be one year that they do really well, one year they drop down, the next year maybe they do doubly as well, and it keeps like zigzagging up. But the overall trend of these companies is upward. And what you also have to remember is that the index doesn't track the specific companies, it tracks the top 500. So it's always the top 500 performing companies. So even if a single individual company is not doing so well, it's not necessarily going to like drag down the index, if that makes sense. It just is not going to be in that top 500 anymore. So because of that, the top 500 index is just over time, like over the course of 30 years, that zigzag line is going up and up and up, which means if you keep your money in for even half of that, you're still going from here to here. This doesn't help if you're listening and you're not watching on YouTube. But yeah, it's basically if you can ride out those zigzags, you still end up making money because of compound interest. And the dollar cost average just means that it doesn't matter if you invest when there's a dip, quote unquote. Because it means that eventually that valuation will go up the next day, and then it might drop down again the next day, and then it'll go up again. But the average it's pretty much irrelevant, I think, for someone who is investing for long-term asset building and income generating wealth. But I have really just completely scratched the surface there of like actual the mechanics of investing, and I do suggest you either do a course or like look up some videos on YouTube to understand how the stock market works, but I wouldn't get too caught up in it either. It is, it's really beneficial to understand, but the thing about these index funds on like Vanguard and Plum and Hargreaves Lansdown is that the fund does all the work. You have to just go open the stocks and shares ISA, set up that direct debit transfer, and then set that direct debit to go to a stock, an S&P 500 fund, and then like let the platform do the work. And that's what's lazy about it. It's like, yeah, you can learn if you
When you
want.
know that what you're investing in only has that upward trajectory, you just know that all you have to do is stick it out. And I think the most important thing is when you're looking at investing in these types of stocks and shares is you are looking at a long-term gain. So when people are trying to get like a quick extra bit of cash, like that's probably not the best way to do it, because the money can go down in that time period as well as up, like Dev said. Um, so it is tricky, but also I think it's hard when you don't see an example, because the only reason I actually started to take it seriously in the whole investing, especially in the S&P 500, because I didn't do it for a while, but I knew it was a thing. But only when I saw, I think it was like Ali Abdal, he did a video about like his investments and like where he puts his money or something like that. And I saw he actually like showed where his money started and where it is now, and he'd been investing for like 7 years or something at that point. And when I saw the growth, I was like, what? And all that money is free? Like he didn't do anything but put that money there. And then I started getting into these investing pages on TikTok. This was way back, like in COVID times, and I actually started to take investing seriously. And then I saw what other people are investing in and what they started with and their experience with it. So maybe that is something to kind of look into, is just like see actual examples of how other people are doing it and what their experience has been, just to give you a bit more confidence that that could be you too. And it's really a lot more beneficial for you to start sooner rather than later, rather than just keep mulling it over and thinking about, should I do it, should I not? Like you can actually see in the proof that the earlier that they've started, it's been better for them, because the longer that they've had those accounts open and the direct debits going in, and then the reward has been greater at the end, and they're still reaping rewards on it. So yeah, that's definitely something that kind of helped push me into actually clicking, yeah, I'm gonna put this much money every single month. And also when you set up the direct debits, you don't have to think about it. Like you just kind of forget about it. It's not like money you have to move physically, or money you feel like, oh, you're parting with, because it just goes automatically whenever your wage comes in, however you want to do it. But one thing I wanted to ask before, when you touched on the whole net worth thing that you calculated with yourself, and you mentioned the assets and things that you included, what liabilities did you include, or what do you consider to be a liability in your life currently? And is that something that you're trying to like work around?
So when I first did that, my biggest liability was just like credit card debt.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I didn't include my student loan just because it's so big. And also, like, I don't know, in the UK, it's less of a personal debt, I feel like.
Oh, is it in the
I think maybe
Scotland?
compared to the US.
Oh, in the US. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like US, UK comparison. I unfortunately did have to pay university fees because I think with Scotland, if you live here 3 years prior to going to university, you get no fees. Even though I'm Scottish, still had to pay fees. I know, very heartbreaking. But yeah, I didn't include them. And then I just included, yeah, at the time it was credit card debt. So right now I don't have like a liability, like a big liability, because I'm very careful now. I don't use buy now pay later. I don't put anything on big credit cards. I don't I don't have a car that I finance as well, which I think is most people's liability. I'm not going to lie. I think that's the most common liability you'd have on there if you're working out your net worth, would be your car payment. But that's temporary, and that's something that hopefully you can afford before you actually take
It's
out
good
that
to hear then
financing.
that you can be in a place where it is negative, that you've turned it back around to positive and you've maintained that as well. Because I think what can happen is, if you do find yourself in the negative and you actually acknowledge it, then you almost feel like you're stuck there and you just kind of stay there and accept it, instead of actually trying to turn the tables and making sure that you can stay in that positive. Because it's not actually a calculation I've done. I feel like I should definitely do that, because it would also, on the other hand, be motivating to know, like, if I was in a negative, which I don't think I am, because I don't have credit card debt. The only debt I have is my student loan at the moment, or if you're considering the property that I live in that I pay a mortgage on. Um, but yeah, there is a good, I'm sure there's like a good benefit to actually knowing what your net worth is now, and maybe having a figure of what you imagined yourself to have a net worth as in the future, and then comparing your assets and liabilities to see, okay, well, if my net worth is at this now and I want it to be this much, what assets am I going to have to build and what liabilities am I going to have to, like, take out the picture, and then what the steps I going to do to get that done.
Yeah, I think that's a really good exercise. I think that's a really important point, actually, in terms of like, realistically, I think everyone listening, just get out some paper and like write your assets down, write your liabilities down, and just have them there in front of you to see, like, okay, this is my starting point. Because that's what I had to do when I was in debt. It was actually credit card debt, my overdraft. Like, it was so negative that it was slightly demotivating to see that big red number, because I didn't have any savings or anything. And that was only like 5.5 years ago. So it's not even like that long that I've taken to completely turn things around. And I was only able to turn it around because I wrote those 2 columns and I looked at it and I just like thought in my head, okay, I'm gonna make a plan to and my initial plan was just to flip that around a little bit and like not have so much red and like maybe just be green. Whereas now I'm thinking, okay, I have very minimal liabilities. How can I keep my liabilities low, but also maybe hit like maybe a 6-figure net worth in like a couple of years' time? Is that possible? Is it possible through maybe funneling money into investments? Because like it's the whole idea of like working smart and not hard. Like if I sat there and tried to save my way to 100k net worth, it would probably take me like a good chunk of time and a good chunk of like compromising my own like wants and needs, I guess, and having to like save loads of money. Whereas if I funnel some money into like a stocks and shares ISA and the S&P 500, then I can also rely on an element of compound interest and the economy boosting that up a little bit. So it like takes away some of the like labor from me as well. So it's like thinking about how I can allocate what my assets are if I want to hit that 6-figure goal, if it is a 6-figure goal, sooner. But you've inspired me there to try and actually think about, okay, maybe when I'm 30 I could aim for like a certain
Yeah, I think
number.
it's a cool way to look at it. I haven't actually looked at it myself like that before, but I was just thinking, because when I always think about my wealth, I always think about the number in my bank account. But I think it's more important to have that money in assets. So, like having that higher net worth, because that doesn't necessarily mean, if you have a high net worth, that doesn't mean that that money's in your account and accessible today. That just means you've invested it into things that you then could, pull that money out later if you needed to. But I think that's probably the better position to be in, just because generally, if you are putting your money into assets, it is growing, should be growing. So if it's in your bank account, that's just stagnant. That's just the money that you have. Unless you're in a really good high interest account, which are really hard to come by these days. So, and they do say that if you keep your money in your bank account, don't they say that your money actually decreases in value over time because of inflation? So the best thing you can do with your money is actually invest it and build your asset portfolio so that your money is actually growing rather than decreasing in value. Because when I first heard that, that freaked me out. I was like, take all my money out of the bank account now, because the thought of working so hard for all that money and then it decreasing in value, not even being worth that much in like a couple of years' time, if I'd like, spent time saving up a big pot. I was like, why? Why would I do that? It's such a waste.
There's no point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially if you have done like, if I were to sit there and do my calculation, like my assets versus liabilities, and in my head be like, okay, I want 100k net worth by 30 and I'm going to save my way there. By 30, that's the saving that you do is worth less if it's all going into a bank account. So that is such a good point. And actually, like the best way to actually organize your money if you are going to try and build wealth and build assets specifically is, if you're going to keep stuff in a bank account, make sure it's a high interest bank account. And if it's a high interest bank account, give it a very specific purpose. So like if you have an emergency fund or you want to build an emergency fund, stick that in a high interest savings account, because that's not money that you're going to need to be super accessible because it's an emergency fund. So you can afford to like lock that away a little bit, because those high interest accounts do come with like, you have a maximum transfer amount in some of them, and also like you can't access it for maybe like 6 months or a year or something like that. And then if you have anything else, like if you earn anything else, but you know you're not going to be spending it in maybe like a year or 2 years time, it's like not short term, not needed for the short term, that's when you can think about investing it into an asset. And you know what else I was thinking about? Like the fact that assets are so varied. So I think what we've spoken about is property, stocks and shares, and what I've recently come across from some American financial influencers that I follow is art. And I think that's quite cool because obviously art's probably in the middle of like stocks and shares and property, because you obviously don't need a huge cash sum for art, but you do need a good network to know what art to even buy. And also you do need a little bit of cash. Like you probably can't just, you can't invest into art without like a good cash amount. And your art, I feel like the valuation of art is also very subjective as well. So you definitely need to have the right network. And you don't necessarily need to appreciate it, which I think is quite interesting as well. Because I don't appreciate my stocks. I just know that they're going to go up in value and give me returns. So the same kind of...
But you got some pretty art.
Exactly. It's kind of like being able to hang out my stocks and shares. It's like...
There's a little reward.
Yeah, exactly. At least it decorates my flat.
Yeah. Do you know what I heard, though, about art itself? Because of the value of some piece of art so crazy, and there is a very much a rich person's game to, like, invest in art, buy and sell it. I don't know if this is the case now, but I definitely read that back in the day, the reason that art became something that the rich would buy and sell is because they were basically money laundering. Like, they were using the art and putting them at crazy prices so people could actually, like, shift money between themselves and actually, like, do it in a legit way, which actually kind of makes sense because, like, if you think about it, the price of some piece of art, I'm talking like millions and millions of pounds for a canvas, like a piece of paper with paint splattered on it. So when you think about it like that, I'm like, oh, that's actually probably what a lot of people do with it. So then when I read that, I was like, is that a game for like normal people to play? As in, is that something that is actually in my reach? Because it doesn't really seem like... But I don't know if that's actually the case with most people. I just think it is interesting how something like that commands that much money, and it's always obviously like super wealthy people that are in that game, like bidding it, like these auctions and stuff. I don't know, maybe I watch too many movies as well, because there's a lot of movies about gangsters buying art and obviously they're not legit. So
no, that's really true. I think I maybe got too sucked into this. I'll have to look into that.
I would double check, because I know that there's whole NFT thing came up as well, and that's like the digital version of that.
Yeah,
so
that's something I really wanted to, it's low key kind of embarrassing, but it's literally been on my to-do list since COVID.
No way.
There's just like one or two NFT, not brands, but like they were collections, but they were for like female empowerment. So that's why I really wanted to invest into them, but I never got round to it. And now I'm just like, I can't even remember how to do it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that is a confusing world. But yeah, it's just food for thought. I don't know how true that information is, so take that with a pinch of salt. I may have just been talking out my ass.
Very,
but
very big pinch of salt.
I heard it. So
what do you think about like Birkins and like Chanel handbags and like handbags, designer handbags in general as investments? Because I just feel like if you're gonna buy designer handbags as an investment, you can't actually use them, because you can't. It's the same as a home. Like if you're buying your home to live in it, it's not an asset.
But I think doesn't the bag go up in value over time as well? Is it like an instant? Because I haven't looked into it enough to know like how it appreciates. So if it does go up over time, because I know the Chanel especially, like it used to be worth a certain amount, and now these days they're crazy. Like people have made so much money on their like worn Chanels, for example. So, but they have worn them and they have like used them, but they're still they're still worth it. Because there's even people these days that are investing in those, like women that invest in those specifically because they know that they'll get the money for it, and they get a cute bag to like use in the meantime. But they do use them. Yeah.
Well, that's what I thought, because I always thought maybe my like wealthy purchase could be a Birkin, and I'm very morally torn between that, because I'm like, I don't know if, because I've never been a designer person,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It's because my lifestyle's never afforded me to be able to be a designer person. So I feel very like morally conflicted between buying designer things just because I have money, because I also don't want to play into that whole like I wear designer stuff because I'm wealthy.
Yeah. But then if you are doing it to invest, that's a different story though, isn't it? It's not like,
But that's why I'm stuck, because I'm like, if I was investing in a bag and it was an asset that's going to grow in value, then maybe. But if it's not going to grow in value, if I'm going to use it, then why would
yeah,
I?
I don't think I would, if I knew it wasn't going to grow in value and by using it, then I wouldn't use it.
But then how do you tell like a sales associate, you're like, I'm buying this not to wear it. Can I sell it back to you in 10 years? Like,
I don't
do
think
you know
you
what I mean?
tell
Like,
them
how do
that.
you confirm that?
I think it's the same as any other investment, like the art, for example, or just even the property. Like you buy it knowing the value it is now, but I think there's a lot of research that goes into these bags and which ones are going to be worth more, because a lot of them aren't. So there's certain styles and things, and I think it's just the trajectory of. So say, for example, we know S&P 500 is a good thing to invest in now because of its past and because of how much it's appreciated over time. So in the same way, if you know a bag has like increased in value consistently and it continues to do that, that's probably the one to go for, because you know it's in 10 years time it's still going to have that upward trend and you're still going to make good money from it. But there'll be bags that won't. They would have just been trending for a while and then they flopped and like no one's interested in them anymore. But there are certain, just like there's certain stocks and shares to invest in, I think the bags work a certain way as well. But there is a lot of ethics involved in also just the designers in general, like you mentioned, the way they operate and all that kind of thing. So it's like you are still giving money to these brands, knowing even if you're wanting to get money back, it's still like that money's going in their pocket. So it's a question of, do you want to contribute to that? And yeah, it's a bigger like thing to kind of figure out. But
I feel like I won't end up doing it. I'm not gonna lie, because I feel like I would just feel really like gross.
It's not something
There's
that
definitely
I've
things I
considered.
want to invest in. Like I want to invest into really nice, high quality gold jewelry, but that's because I already do that. So it's like that's so easy for me to do. But like designer stuff, it's definitely like a moral thing for me.
There's also so much like fake designer as well. I just feel like, is it even, it almost feels a little bit tacky to me these days. I'm just like, there's so much like replicas of these original pieces, but it just actually has started to devalue the original pieces in my eyes.
Yeah.
Like obviously for other people it would be a complete different story. Everyone can have their own opinions on it, but for me to like buy it, I would just feel a bit icky knowing that like this next person has bought a copy that looks exactly the same, and even though I probably get the money for mine, it's again the ethics thing. I think I've never actually considered buying a designer bag, I'm not gonna lie. Like it's not, I've always seen other people have them and I'm like, nice, cool. But I don't have that desire. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like sometimes I look at them, I'm like, oh, it looks nice with the outfit, but like the thing with designer as well, like what you just said about people buying a lot of fakes and dupes and stuff. A lot of people buy designer to signal that they're rich, rather than like for me, I'm torn between, oh, does buying designer mean higher quality stuff? Does buying designer mean I would be respected more in like a business context? You know, like things like that, which all come from signaling wealth and like signaling success.
But if you look at the most successful people, they're not kitted in the brands.
That's a
and
very
they're
good
not
point.
Yeah, so I don't really think it is necessary. Obviously it's a nice to have. I did definitely go through a phase of like, I wanted to be one of those girls that look like they could afford that stuff and like wear my design. I think I ended up buying like a belt, or like that Gucci belt. It makes me want to vomit thinking about it now because it's just ick. But there are things that I did. It was for the image though. It wasn't, obviously I wasn't investing in it at that time. I just thought like I want to be one of those girls that look cool.
Yeah, I've done that with fake sunnies. And that's the only time I've done it. And even then, I literally did it. I think I wore those sunnies for like a couple of weeks. And now I'm literally like, I feel gross even
Yeah,
just looking
I
at
feel
them.
like it depends on your intention behind it. Because if I was buying something because I genuinely just liked how it looked, that's a different story. Not because I like the fact that other people have it and it's
Yes,
gonna elicit some kind of response from other people.
yeah,
That's completely
that's a
different.
good
Whereas
point.
I was going at it from the point of view of like how other people are gonna perceive me wearing that and how I was gonna look. But I think if I was rich enough to afford those things, I would buy it if I genuinely liked it and wanted to wear it, not because of the other stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I think after so with the designer stuff I have bought that I haven't like questioned or don't make me feel icky. There are things that like the designer I don't even know some of the designers. It's just like I know those designs just look awesome and like some
Yeah.
things are just really
Because you
flattering.
can appreciate, yeah, and there is a level of quality that does come with. I know some are questionable in the sense that they slap a massive price tag, and I don't think it's worth it. You know, like those T-shirts with the freaking logo on it. But there's things that like you actually can appreciate the quality of it, and you can appreciate the actual the money that you put into it. You actually do get value back that you wouldn't get in like your Primarks or your high street brands. Like, there is a difference in the quality sometimes, which warrants the price tag.
Yeah, sometimes I would say
Sometimes.
sometimes.
Caveat with the sometimes.
And I feel like a really good quote to round off this conversation is from Morgan Housel on The Psychology of Money. Have you read The Psychology of Money?
No, I don't
No,
think so.
that I feel like you would really enjoy that. It's very like psychology based rather than like purely about money. But in that he says buying things to impress people or like buying things to show other people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. And I always like that always rings in my head whenever I'm tempted to buy something that like an influencer is linked and I like the look of or something like that. Um, it'll ring in my head and I just immediately I'm like, I don't even like it. So yeah, I think that was such a juicy conversation. I really enjoyed that. I feel like there's so much more. Like, I really would love to get into the detail of what I invest in because I think you're right. Like, you seeing Ali Abdal's stocks, like, sparking you to actually go in and start investing. Like, I want to be able to do that for other people.
Mm.
And we've both said in this episode, start today. If you
Yeah.
take anything away from this, like, start building those assets today because you want those assets to actually pay for your lifestyle later down the line. You don't want to be relying on your one income for the rest of your life. You want to start building those assets and have them grow as you grow. So if that's one thing you can take away from this, I will be very happy. But we're probably going to talk a lot more about like money and wealth and stuff anyway. So if you do have any questions off the back of this episode, or if we've skimmed over anything or accidentally said like an abbreviation or something and not explained it, let us know. In the comments on YouTube, if you're watching there, then you would have seen me do that very confusing graph of the S&P 500. And I always say this, but let us know what we can also do to make this a better podcast to listen to, better episodes to listen to, and how we can be the bestest hosts for you ever. And don't forget to leave us a rating if you're listening on Spotify. Give us a wee follow. And also you can leave like a review and a rating on Apple Podcasts as well. But thank you so much for listening and we will be back next week. Bye.
Bye.